It's really amazing that they built in modern times, tried to recreate this kinds of epic feeling, like something really beautiful with epic architecture from that old days to really connect to the beauty, because that's behind why they are not doing it anymore, because beauty, it's really touching you in the soul and in the heart. And in this Kali Yuga, in this completely backward society that we're in right now, these chaotic times, everything is done to not feel that kind of beauty and peace and love and amazement. The fact that this actually is being done here is really quite nice, and it's also that it's been commissioned by President Modi is quite surprising to me, but great job, hats off for this beautiful thing. And it's also really new, it's like 1.5 years, 2 years. Okay, so officially we're not allowed to film inside the corridor, but since this is my last day, I feel a little bit extra, and I have this trick learned from Shubham to keep the camera in my hand palm, so nobody is really seeing that I'm carrying it.
You have your channel?
Yes, I have a channel, yes. Because there's one topic that I still really wanted to raise, and I think it's very important, or at least this corridor is like the perfect context to discuss this topic, which is all these legends, all these stories, all these epics, all these myths that you see depicted here are of course all written out and captured in the Mahabharata and Ramayana and the Bhagavad Gita, and like these ancient texts like the Puranas. They all describe these fantastical stories of creatures that look like half human, half animal, and have like multiple arms, and are like huge and magical weapons and chariots blessed by the gods, and all these things that, like, within our current understanding of how things are, sound like fiction, right? But what I want to get into is to explain this from a different kind of perspective and put this in a different context than the one that we currently hold for our imagination. And if you recall that presentation that I gave at the lake with the 3 circles of the Phoenix cycle and the 2 small ones, the 3 big ones and the 2 small ones in between, that looping construct basically of resets of civilizations, that first circle, I described to that one as the Vapor Canopy Times. And the Vapor Canopy Times, what I mean with that is that there was a time when the circumstances, the atmospheric circumstances of the planet were completely different than what we know now. And it was like much more... Say Mahakal. I think this is a bit safer situation. A little bit hidden behind this nice tree. But when I started filming with the kids, the guards caught on and he was getting to me, closer to me, so he was making quite clear that this was not supposed to happen. But I think now we're good. So what I was saying is that first entire circle, that period, the pre-flood times or the antediluvian times or the vapor canopy, there's all kinds of different ways that we can refer to these, basically describes a time where the atmospheric circumstances were completely different from what we are familiar with right now. So the pressure in the air, the humidity was much higher, and basically there was not really a difference between night and day. It was always just very similar kind of circumstances, and also with more nitrogen in the air, I think, or like at least different kinds of atmospheric circumstances that also made it possible for plants to grow much bigger, for animals to grow much bigger, but also for humans to grow much bigger and live much longer, because wounds would heal faster. And this creates a totally new scenario where it becomes possible that giants roamed over the planets, that there's like people that can be recognized as gods or demigods with like different kinds of extraordinary strengths, and also knowledge of how to wield these strengths and how to build a relationship with the natural and the metaphysical world, like using all kinds of spiritual superpowers in a way. Because these earlier times, there were actually the gods that we describe in all these different systems that we know of, like the Greek and the Egyptian and the Mesopotamian gods and Hindu gods. All these different systems, they earlier iterations of humans that lived back then, that had this kind of knowledge and strength, and in these kinds of circumstances they were much more developed in understanding things, and this entirely new scenario makes it much more reasonable and feasible for these kinds of legends to actually be true. And I'm not saying that they are 100% true, because of course over time with mouth-on-mouth delivery, these narratives, they get like thickened and made more incredible and harder to believe, and after millennia of time going over it, things of course change in these stories. But just to create this different perspective of an entirely different context where this kinds of stuff could actually been happen is the whole point of what I'm trying to describe here right now. And the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, which were different incarnations of Vishnu, which I talked about also in previous presentations, these were messengers. Basically, they were communicating divine knowledge and capturing this information from these stories from back in the day that had survived over time, and captured them in these ancient books. And there's still like the moment that kind of started happening was like, I think like a later Vedic period. So the Vedic period, as I described also earlier, started to kind of like form around 1500 BC. After quite some time of that Vedic culture to establish, around I think 1200 to 400 BC. It's still a big range, so much room to be right in. But it was those moments that these kinds of stories started to be put into text. Before that, they were always just told mouth by mouth. And that's basically the point that I wanted to make of all these different legends that are depicted here, to kind of get a feeling with the things that I'm saying. And just to make clear, this is like very similar in all these different systems. Like I've mentioned the different pantheons of these cultures, these civilizations, like the Greek, the Egyptians, the the Romans, the Celts, Mesopotamia, like all of these, all these myths about giants and titans and gods fighting them, they are all in a very similar light happening around in this vapor canopy kind of circumstances. And much of them are also just, especially in the north and in the Europe side of the world, saying and explaining very similar stories, but with different names to the characters, changed over time into slightly different attributes and descriptions of these people, depending on the culture. But yeah, that's one more important thing that I thought would be very relevant to discuss while here, enjoying my last moments in Ujjain. And one other beautiful thing that connects to all of this from the trip is that epic movie that I saw together with Ritwik called Kalki, AD 2896, something like that, I don't know. Kalki. Just that entire movie is connecting so many threads to everything that I have been talking about here in Ujjain. Like, it talks about all these epic stories and shown in like super amazing CGI special effects, and also with like this narrative of the avatar Vishnu, which we've been discussing, coming into the end days. Like, so many different prophecies of different systems also are prophesizing about predicting these end times, and like this second return of Christ, or return of the chief cornerstone, or there's all kinds of different ways that different systems refer to these times, which can be predicted based on this cyclicality that we talked about, of these returns of these planetary bodies, these objects in the sky, these planets, like the Nemesis X object. They're all basically that use astrological clock that ticks, and that makes it possible for us to understand these cycles better, which is like very esoteric knowledge, which is not very known and spread and kept quite secret to the masses. And the reasons for that we can discuss later and get into at a different moment. But I just wanted to really pick that out, like how beautifully watching that movie in Bangalore fits into this entire experience. And it's also epic. So I hope you enjoyed that little montage. I just wanted to finish off that I think it's really amazing that they built in modern times, tried to recreate this kind of epic feeling, like something really beautiful with epic architecture from that old days, to really connect to the beauty, because that's something that we really have lost over time. Like, we don't build this nicely in general anymore, and I think there's a certain agenda, a purpose behind why they are not doing it anymore, because beauty, it's really touching you in the soul and in the heart, and in this Kali Yuga, in this completely backward society that we're in right now, these chaotic times, everything is done to not feel that kind of beauty and peace and love and amazement in our lives anymore. So the fact that this actually is being done here is really quite nice, and it's also that it's been commissioned by President Modi is quite surprising to me, but great job, hats off for this beautiful thing. And it's also really new. It's like 1.5 years, 2 years that they have this here, that it's built. So Not too many people have seen it yet, probably. I highly recommend to come. It's really impressive. Check. Join the Yours2Source email course today, subscribe to my mailing list, and ensure you never miss a step on this journey of spiritual growth. Your path to aligning with Source and discovering how it wants to express itself through you begins here.